Thanos forever changed the MCU. But was he really as inevitable as he claimed? Maybe not. A new theory puts the blame of the Mad Titan's rise to power right at Odin's feet. Is it true? Let's discuss. When Thanos tore through the Avengers like tissue paper on his quest to get the Infinity Stones in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, the Mad Titan made one thing clear: he was inevitable. Heck, the big purple Mr. Clean kept saying as much in Endgame. And at the time, I totally believed it. Sure, Thanos mostly just sat in a chair for like, 6 years. But when he showed up to finally make his move, he seemed like an unstoppable force. But is that truly the case? Was Thanos always destined to dust half the universe? Or can you blame his total domination on the actions of one person? Well, as you study the entire history of the MCU, as well as examine comments made by Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers, it's clear that Thanos' victory at the end of Avengers Infinity War can be traced back to one man. And no, it's not Falcon. Actually, if you believe this theory, the person responsible for Thanos winning is actually Odin. That's right, Thor's father might very well be the man who allowed Thanos to go through with his crazy snapping plan. How, you ask? Well, it's not a simple answer, so sit back, relax, and let's take a walk through this. As I mentioned, an important part of this is listening to what head honcho Kevin Feige and his MCU super directors, the Russo brothers, have said in the past. They've all made the statement that Thanos would have never been able to collect all the stones if Civil War didn't happen, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. The Avengers would have been tougher, and they would have found a way to destroy the Mind Stone within Vision's head, or even had a better way to protect the Time Stone. But alas, our favorite heroes were divided after the events of Civil War, and they just weren't ready to defend the universe against the Mad Titan. So how does this relate to Odin? Hold on, I'm getting there. Civil War happened because of Zemo. You remember Zemo, right? Like sure, the highlights of Captain America Civil War is obviously the airport fight sequence, so it's sometimes hard to forget that an ordinary man with understandable motivations successfully fractured the entire Avengers team. Zemo was mad because he had lost his family in Sokovia, and vowed vengeance by enacting a super complicated plan that used Bucky Barnes to drift a rift between Captain America and Iron Man. But Zemo didn't just wake up one morning and decide to hurt Earth's mightiest heroes on a whim. His actions were driven by the events of Avengers Age of Ultron, which saw the crazed artificial titular robot Ultron turn Sokovia's capital, Novigrad, into a giant meteor. The end result included the deaths of Zemo's family. If the climactic battle never took place, then Zemo would have lived a long, happy life and never would have started Civil War. So where's Odin? Is he involved yet? No, calm down, Internet. He's still coming. So now we get to look at who's responsible for Ultron, who attacked Novigrad and wiped out Zemo's family, and then caused Zemo to break up the Avengers, which led to Thanos accomplishing his quest for the Infinity Stones. See, all these ripples matter, folks. But anyway, no matter which way you spin it, Tony Stark is responsible for Ultron. Tony has a knack for creating things that either turn evil or very quickly fall into evil hands. Heck, even after Avengers Endgame, when his epic sacrifice seemed to say that Tony wouldn't be able to build any more dangerous tech, we got Spider-Man Far From Home, which focused entirely on Tony's dangerous tech. But out of all the things Tony built over the years that threatened to destroy the world, Ultron was by far the deadliest. Tony, you're just full of pop culture references. How can you not suspect that your artificial intelligence was gonna turn evil 2 seconds after turning on? Like, it was just a bad idea from the start, bud. Tony's always been paranoid about defending Earth from a bigger threat, but that fear was amplified in Age of Ultron, which pushed him to create the robot. But what amplified this fear? For that, you have to look at the beginning of the second Avengers movie, which saw Wanda infect Tony's mind with her vaguely defined powers and give him visions of mass destruction. First of all, Tony, why did you leave your suit? You're in the middle of a bad guy base. Stay inside your protective armor. Jeez, didn't think we had to spell it out for the guy. This event was the straw that broke the camel's back. Tony went home and immediately went about finishing Ultron. So Wanda was responsible for driving Tony into a paranoid enough state to create Ultron, which in turn led to Civil War. But Wanda only exists because of the scepter and the Mind Stone. Because, this was back in a time when no one in the MCU would dare whisper the word mutant. So they retconned Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver's backstory to make them special instead, with powers stemming from Loki's scepter. So does the blame of all fall on the scepter for creating Wanda, who would drive Tony crazy with her powers, which would cause him to create Ultron and directly affect Zemo's family in a way that led to the Avengers breaking up? Still no, the scepter was only on Earth because of Loki and all of his mischievous scheming. And while it may be easy to say Loki is to blame for everything, I actually think the ultimate blame for it all stops at Odin, who, thanks to some poor dad skills, made Loki rebellious in the first place. Like if Odin had just been upfront and honest with Loki about his heritage from the start, would things have been different? In the early days, Odin seemed like a really good dad to Thor, but left Loki out in the cold, which set off a series of events that would eventually lead to Thanos taking over. Okay, are you ready for it all in order? So, the all-powerful Odin neglected Loki enough to cause the trickster to rebel, which led to the scepter with the Mind Stone arriving on Earth, which would be used to give Wanda her powers, who would then use her powers to infect Tony's mind and push his already paranoid personality into overdrive mode, which would cause him to create Ultron, who would go on to wreak havoc in Sokovia, which would end the lives of Zemo's family, who would be so consumed with grief he would hatch a plan to destroy the Avengers with a civil war, which would leave Earth defenseless for Thanos to swoop in and decimate half the universe. Wow, thanks a lot, Odin. Alright, that whole breakdown was a very direct through line of why Odin was ultimately the cause of Thanos snapping away half the universe. But that's not the only reason he should bear the bulk of the blame. Throughout the entire MCU franchise, Odin has seemed to make questionable decision after questionable decision. He zigs when he should zag, you know? Perhaps more than any character, he has had the most influence on where the Infinity Stones have ended up. We all know that Odin has a throne room where he keeps a range of special and fake items that hold immense power. But Odin decided long ago that instead of keeping the all-powerful Tesseract under his watchful eye, he hid it on Earth in a small remote village. Look, Odin, I'm not telling you how to do your job here. I'm sure you're an excellent king. But maybe, just maybe, don't hide one of the most powerful weapons in the galaxy in a place that's easily accessible by crazy Nazis. Or at least check up on it now and then. Like, you hid it away from the world for a reason, just don't forget about it after 1,000 years. Maybe when you exiled Thor to Earth, you could have had to make sure it was still in the wall in that village in Norway, just saying. The fact that by the end of the Avengers, Thor returns the Tesseract to Asgard, and no one seems to have a problem with it, proves that the cube should have been kept close by to begin with. It's indirect decisions and choices like that which made it easy for Thanos to enact his plan. But that's not the only Infinity Stone that Odin has handled. At the end of Thor: The Dark World, Earth and Jane are saved by the bland Malachite, and his evil plan to spread darkness everywhere thanks to the Ether, aka the Reality Stone. In the mid-credits sequence, Volstagg and Sif give the Reality Stone to the Collector for safekeeping, presumably under Odin's order. But wait. Yes, I know who most likely gave this order was Loki masquerading as Odin, so you can't really blame Odin for making this stupid decision, but here's why I disagree. Volstagg and Sif seem to have no qualms leaving the stone with the creepy Collector, which means that they agreed with the order, and it was probably what the real Odin would have done anyway. Plus, if Loki just took over as Odin, he would want to act like the real deal as much as possible at the beginning to avoid suspicion, right? Which is why I think the real Odin would have made the exact same call. But anyways, this was an extremely unwise decision no matter which way you look at it. Volstagg gives the reasoning that because the Tesseract is already on Asgard, the Reality Stone must be somewhere else, since it's unwise to keep two Infinity Stones in the same place. And while that logic makes sense, they couldn't think of anywhere else to put it than rather with the Collector? Why not bury it in some unknown planet? Or have Heimdall transport it to the furthest reaches of the universe? Don't leave it with the guy who keeps people in cages. Like in Avengers Infinity War, Peter Quill says only an idiot would give that man a stone. And when Peter Quill is calling something idiotic, then you know you have a serious problem. Because if the Reality Stone was kept in the Asgardian vault, there would have been good chance it would have been destroyed when Asgard was destroyed, or just left floating in Asgard debris for eternity. So overall, Odin's handling of all the Infinity Stones was another reason Thanos was able to snap his fingers. And finally, there's actually one more key point I need to mention that helps prove Odin was responsible for Thanos' rise to power. And that, of course, is everything surrounding the Infinity Gauntlet. People tend to overlook the fact that Thanos needed Eitri to forge the Infinity Gauntlet for him in order to hold the stone successfully. Without this, Thanos' whole plan wouldn't have worked. Can you imagine Thanos trying to hold the stones in a potato sack or shaking them together to make them do something cool? Sounds disastrous, right? When Thor finds Eitri, he learns that the whole race has been wiped out. The star shut down and Eitri's hands wrapped in stone, all thanks to the Mad Titan. The giant dwarf mentions how Asgard was supposed to protect them from Thanos, but they never showed up. This was most likely because Asgard was dealing with Hela, who was another direct result of Odin's negligence and dark past. If they weren't so busy dealing with Odin's mistake, maybe the Asgardians could have stopped Thanos before Eitri made the gauntlet for him. So overall, Odin was not only directly and indirectly involved in actions that would make it easy for Thanos to win, meaning helping the Avengers break up and mishandling the Infinity Stones. But he was also responsible for helping Thanos get the one special item he needed in order to successfully wield the stones. No matter which way you look at it, the paths always lead back to Odin. So although he may look like a great leader, all the evidence seems to suggest he isn't. Maybe if Odin was alive and operating at peak efficiency, Thanos would have had a tougher time winning. But looking over his history, yeah, that seems doubtful. Thanos called himself inevitable, but it's clear his rise to power was the result of a complicated web of smaller events, all tracing back to Odin. What do you think? Was Odin responsible for the Mad Titan? Let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe to CBR for more awesome MCU content. Thanks for watching.